If you're looking for large character homes, tree-lined streets, and a neighborhood that's very close to downtown, today we're checking out Halifax's South End. I'm Tom Moore, your host of the Living in Halifax channel. As I mentioned, we're doing a neighborhood tour today right in the South End of Halifax. Now, before we get going to it, just wanted to throw up a couple of new things we've got going on the channel. We've got a few guides for home buyers, home sellers, as well as a ChatGPT bot that you can interact with if you've got any real estate questions. There's also a space there to book a meeting with me if you're thinking about making a move to Halifax, whether it's in the South End or other neighborhoods. We do sales, so we'll list your home, or we also obviously help buyers here. Now, today we're going to be going over quite a few different things, pros and cons of living in the South End, amenities, community, house prices, proximity, basically giving you a whole snapshot of the neighborhood. So without further ado, let's go check it out. So let's talk about the location and lifestyle for the South End. Now, the South End is located just south of downtown. What that actually allows it to have is you don't really have to deal with commuting the same way that the rest of the city does. And that's because nothing is beyond the South End. So traffic really only kind of flows in and out of the South End if you're going there. So commute times are almost cut. The other cool thing about the location here is you do have some great kind of forest assets. And then obviously you're basically surrounded by the ocean. There's some houses that are literally on the ocean, but generally wherever you're on the South End, you're going to be able to walk to the ocean pretty much. In terms of who this neighborhood is for, it's a real wide span. You've got the universities here, obviously. So there's a student population. They tend to live in specific areas of the South End, but you've also got a lot of higher net worth individuals who own the home. So these might be doctors, lawyers, entrepreneurs, professionals that make quite a bit of money. And then you've also got this older demographic who's been here for the last 30, 40 years, who really add a little bit of that kind of East Coast culture to the neighborhood as well. Finally, you've got some families that have been moving in here that might have some additional wealth, depending on what their situation is. On the condo side of things, although this does change, condos tend to be relatively affordable. We'll talk about that in a minute. So if it's, a small family or maybe a couple or something like that, you might find some of those people. But generally, the South End is going to be that higher price point. So you're going to get a neighborhood that kind of matches that. All right, so let's talk about housing. Now, the South End is characterized by larger lots generally and larger homes. And I'm actually on this kind of cool bridge here. One thing you'll notice about the South End and this neighborhood is that there is a rail line that runs through. Now, on the other side of these bridges, they've got these little kind of islands that are separated from the rest of the city by these bridges and the railway. Now, the reason I'm talking about that is because those homes on one side of the island tend to be on the arm. This is the body of water that wraps around Halifax and has pretty much the most expensive price point. So this is going to be the peak of the prices. You get things running, all the way up into the $8 million range for certain oceanfront properties and even higher. But the South End generally for homes are going to be kind of hovering right around that $1 million and up range, $1 million being pretty much the lowest possible that you're going to pay. Condos, on the other hand, you've got a pretty wide range. You've got some older buildings with higher condo fees, and you've got some newer buildings with lower condo fees. On average, we're seeing those hovering around that $550,000, $600K mark, but it's going to be a real wide span in terms of what you're going to find for housing. When we go back to talking about the actual specific homes, you've got these old character 100-plus-year-old homes, and then you've got some newer ones that have been recently built or something's been torn down and built in their place. But overall, South End real estate is going to be some of the most expensive you're going to find anywhere around Halifax. All right, so let's talk about the community and the amenities of the South End. Now, obviously in the previous kind of portion of this, I spoke to who lives in the neighborhood. It's pretty wide ranging, right? Now, the kind of big staples that change that community makeup are Dalhousie University and St. Mary's University. And in the start of the fall, I find that those universities really breathe new life into a large portion of the South End. However, throughout the rest of the South End, kind of where the large homes are and whatnot, you've certainly got a feeling of it's these nice tree-lined streets. It's the wealthiest area in Halifax, so you're going to get a bit of that feeling down here. Now, there's certain families scattered throughout. You've got tons of public schools, as well as the private schools that are either within or on the outskirts for the private schools of the South End. And then when it comes to amenities, you're smack dab in the middle of the city. So you're really close to downtown, all the great restaurants, everything that has to offer. You've got the university sporting facilities, which you get memberships too if you want to use the tools, the gyms, or whatever the heck you want. You've got the hospitals, both the children's and the adult hospitals that service the entire Atlantic Canadian region. And then you've got obviously everything else like the boardwalk. You've got Point Pleasant Park. These are some really great assets that are very easily reachable from the South End. Now, the one caveat to the South End, I would say, is its walkability. In the part that I am in, which is the deep South End, and much of the deep South End, it's not very walkable. You can't really walk to, grocery stores, pharmacies, coffee shops, things like that. So when it comes to the South End, it's got a lot of amenities, but depending on where you are, this isn't exclusive for the entire neighborhood. Depending on where you are, you're going to probably want a car, particularly in the winter. So it doesn't have that same walkability like some areas like either downtown, West End, North End, even Dartmouth, places like that would have. And the trade-off is that you do get these larger lots, quieter streets, and larger homes. All right, I'll give you some quick pros and cons of the South End. When it comes to pros, obviously, amenities, you're close by to everything, including downtown. You've got great schools, whether they're the public schools or the private schools are obviously nearby. You've got basically no rush hour traffic, which is phenomenal. And you've got the homes. I love the look of the homes, the age of the homes. I like older homes, but there's obviously new homes too. And then when it comes to cons, really, you've only got a couple. It's price point, obviously, and then walkability, which we touched on before. Those are going to be kind of the two limiting factors. So yeah. All right, so let's talk about a little bit of a local's perspective on the South End. So one thing I want to kind of drive home to folks is that the South End is a very large area and it almost has micro areas. So for instance, if you're looking for something that is a bit more walkable, there's certainly going to be places that sort or solve your needs. When you're looking for something that's a little bit more affordable, you might be in a certain place that tends to have a lot of condos and apartment buildings so that you can purchase a condo. And finally, if you're somebody that is on the younger side of things and are in a fortunate position where you can afford to buy a home or a condo in the South End, it's definitely worth getting a little bit more insight on, who your neighbors might be, right? If you want young people to be around you, South End, just basically due to its barrier to entry there, is going to be a little limiting in that factor. Now, the people are all great, but your neighbors might be 10, 20, 30, 40 years older than you, depending. So that's kind of the only other thing worth knowing there. Other than that, though, I love the South End. I mean, the walking is, even just on the streets, is great. The one downside, obviously, is in certain areas, the cafe culture, the coffee culture. But other than that, it's a phenomenal place to call home. Well, folks, if that makes you want to move to the South End, or perhaps you're thinking about listing your home, I would love to guide you through that process. Once again, I am Tom Moore with eXp Realty right here in Halifax. And if you're thinking about buying or selling, then obviously check out some of those guides. It's a great place to get started, help you wrap your head around what that process might look for you in the near future. Other than that, have a great day. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.